Kansas basketball pretty much left with one option at this point in time. Go overseas to pick up some sort of talent playing basketball. And Neoklis Avdalas, who's a top young player from Greece in the NBA draft process, he certainly would fit the billing. We're going to deep dive into his game and how he'd fit with KU.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on? Derek Johnson here. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making it your first listen every day. Thank you to the everydayers catching each and every episode of the show. We are free and available anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. And on today's edition, we're breaking down Neoklis Avdalas. He is one of the young top players over in Greece right now in the NBA draft process. Could he come to college? Could he come to Kansas? Would he be a big swing and home run hit for Bill Self at this time in the portal, especially after losing out on Darryn Williams? We'll get into all that, his scouting report, NBA draft combine performance, fit with KU possibly, and more on today's episode of the show. So let's start with this. You might not be aware of who Neoklis Avdalas is. I think for some KU fans, they're making this like their guy. They want this to be the addition that replaces what would have been had they been able to land Darryn Williams. So Avdalas is a 19-year-old Greek. He's kind of a, point forward, big forward type. Has the size to be a 4, but a lot of his game is more like a 3. But, in today's age of positionless basketball, like being a 3-4 wing is kind of a perfect position to be. And he's currently in the NBA draft process. Some have him as early as like a early second round pick in that process. Others have him as an undrafted player. So it's going to kind of depend what he wants to do. One thing to keep in mind, he's not a college player, obviously, yet. I mean, he might end up being a college player, but as of right now, the college deadline to withdraw from the draft is different than the international deadline. So the college deadline to withdraw from the draft is May 28th. The deadline for international players to withdraw or stay in the draft is June 15th. So he has time to see who comes, who goes, who stays in the NBA draft. Where does that put me now? Does it slide me up enough where I can get a guarantee where I want to go? It gives him more time to figure out what he wants to do. The downside to that from the KU perspective is that it means that you have to stretch this thing out even longer. And the longer we get, I guess the closer we get to the start of the season and the further we get into the start of summer school, the more you get to a point where it's like, okay, this is going to be a later edition. They're not going to be around during the summer. For an international player, that's a big deal because it's less time that they have to get accustomed with your team. And it worked out okay for Johnny Furphy, who joined late, but Furphy didn't really start to see his minutes like super increase until January. It took some time there, right? That maybe he would have started earlier in the season had he been around during the summer, as opposed to joining in like August or whenever he would have joined the KU roster. But it's still doable. The point being also, the longer you have to wait, the more risky it becomes, because the longer you have to wait, that means other targets are potentially coming off the board. So that is something to know. Does KU even have interest? Well, at this point in time, it sounds like there was some reported brief contact, here or there. To what level that contact was, I don't entirely know. Was it just checking in on price? Was it just, chatting with an agent real quick? I don't know. That could be a lot of different things, right? It does sound like he's already visited Baylor and Virginia Tech. Also mentioned Kansas State being involved after they landed PJ Haggerty. I don't know that would leave them with enough money to grab him, but Ole Miss is another school with interest. ESPN was reporting. So lots of schools that would have interest in this kid, and you would imagine why. One of the big things that seems to be important to him, obviously money is going to be important in every recruitment, but it seems like role or usage is going to be a very important thing. And so it depends. What is do you feel like you have to be the number one guy on a team? Because if you feel like you need to be the number one guy on a team, it's not going to work with Kansas. They have Darryn Peterson. But if he's just like, I just want starter level usage, I want a role where I'm going to start, or, he even has the opportunity where if he's good enough, he could be the second highest usage player on Kansas to just Darryn Peterson, a guy who's going to probably go top 3 in the following NBA draft, to where working off that guy is totally fine. So where does that kind of leave KU? I don't know. But anyway, about his story, he began his professional career in 2021 with Panathinaikos, which is one of the top, it might be the top team in Greece. Then January 2022, he signs a 5-year deal with Panathinaikos. And it kind of works similar if you're familiar with like the European soccer game. That's kind of how European basketball can work too. He was loaned out to the Greek basket league's Karditsa, which is in the same league, but like a smaller club for 2023 to 2024. If you're not familiar with like European stuff, basically why they do that is they'll loan out a younger player. Like if you're a big club, you probably have a lot of good players, but a lot of good veterans on your roster. And maybe you don't have an opportunity for an 18, 19, 17, 20-year-old or something to crack the rotation. You'll loan him out to a lesser team who will therefore have a young, talented player. They're like, great, we get him for a year. And you basically get to allow them to play and develop through playing while not, taking away one of the spots on your roster. That's essentially why they do that. So he gets loaned away to Karditsa. And then on July 25th, 2024, he gets loaned, that's the following season, to Peristeri for this past season where he was. And they ended up finishing in the semifinals of the Basketball Champions League. And so the stats on Avdalas are pretty solid, especially when you consider, he is a 19-year-old. I mean, he started playing when he was 15 years old in the Greek league, which consists of obviously a lot of either former NBA guys or like veteran players from Europe who are really good players, right? That it goes on. So if we just look at this past season where he played for Peristeri, which was his 18-year-old season, he plays for Peristeri, which is part of the top league in Greek and also plays as part of that Champions League. Plays 18 and a half minutes per game combined between the two competitions over 26 games played, 7.7 points, 2.7 rebounds, 1.4 assists, 0.5 steals, 0.3 blocks per game compared to 0.9 turnovers per game. So if you were to basically, take like, okay, the 18 and a half minutes per game, how would that prorate out if he was playing 30 minutes a game, to give you a better idea of like, well, what are we talking here? Well, at that point in time, if he's playing closer to 30 minutes, like, again, it doesn't always work this way because the more minutes you play, the harder it's going to get, the more tired you're going to get, yada, yada, yada. But it basically would put him around a spot where, he's averaging like 12-ish points per game, somewhere around there. He's averaging like 4.5 rebounds, like 2 assists per game on 1.5 or a little over 1 like stocks per game. That would be that. So like solid numbers for sure, especially considering the competition and the adults that he's going up against. Field goal percentages are pretty good. 43.6% from the field, 35.7% from 3-point range. He also shot 70% on free throws. So it's certainly the 3-point percentage will make you feel good if you're a Kansas fan. What's interesting though, in the European League, he did not shoot well from 3 of 14 from 3 in those 6 games, but he was 22 of 56 in the 20 games he played in the league. So total up 25 of 70. So you're looking at a little over 2 threes per game, close to 3 threes per game. But again, that's in limited minutes. If he's playing more minutes, he could get off 4 or 5 threes per game. Again, sounds good for Kansas fan. And if you're watching the highlights, I went back and watched some of his highlights. I would say notes that I just wrote down, like he can really grab and go in transition. He throws down some fun dunks there. I wouldn't say he's not like Sean Kemp or I don't know, Aaron Gordon or something where he's just, but he can, he can dunk it. And if you go under on a ball screen, which he likes to work out of dribbling, which gives you some versatility, you can use a 3-5 pick and roll or a 4-5 pick and roll, depending where he's playing. He's comfortable shooting a 3. He's comfortable shooting a mid-range if you go under. So you do have to respect him. I would say he has a good feel for passing, good feel on pick and rolls, good feel on really good bounce passer, I would say. I don't think I saw in the highlights him throw any lobs though. So that would be one thing that I'm sure you could teach, but a lot of that is feel. Specifically, if you're talking pick and roll game with Flory Bidunga, you think about throwing lobs, right? Like you think about how important that's going to be. So that'll be something that he's going to have to prove if he did come to KU. He's also comfortable spotting up. He's comfortable cutting and just in general playing off the ball. That is such a good skill to have in any player, but especially when you're building a roster around Darryn Peterson. Fair amount of blocks, especially for a wing. Some fun highlight chase down pin blocks against the backboard. Those are fun. I wouldn't say he's like a great shot blocker, but he's a solid shot blocker for his position. And if you have just even a solid shot blocker there, when you already know you have a great shot blocker and Flory at the center, that's a fun combo to have. Honestly, like there's a lot of differences here between their two games, but there actually are a lot of comps. Like if I'm making a Jayhawk comp to Jalen Wilson a little bit, again, it's still different in a lot of ways. Wilson had more power Wilson was a much better rebounder, a much more consistent rebounder. And I think Wilson was probably more a consistent player, at least the final version of Wilson that we remember. But you forget about the younger guy that happened. I think when you look at Avdalas, though, he might have more shooting potential than what Jalen has or had, I guess. But again, with less power and less rebounding, honestly, like some more dunks than Jalen. Jalen was never like a big dunk guy. What took Jalen, though, to the next level, like it wasn't just the talent, it was the mental side of the game. It was his work ethic. It was his will to win. And that's impossible to speak for a guy who's playing overseas that I have no idea. But you can see some of the starter pack with him grabbing and going in transition, getting inside, being able to shoot off the dribble, being able to shoot a three. So there's some comps there. There's some other comps where it doesn't make sense. And I think he has maybe even, I don't know, maybe even a little more guard game to him than Wilson had in some ways, but in other ways, not really. So anyway, let's get to more of his scouting report, his NBA draft combine performance, how he did there, what it tells us about his game, and his possible fit with KU next. Today's episode of Locked On Jayhawks is brought to you by Monarch Money. Have you ever checked your bank account and wondered, where'd all my money go? Maybe you're spending too much on NIL. I don't know. Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place so you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. They have all-in-one convenience where instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track your spending, and even plan long-term goals. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. I know Kansas wishes they could get half off of the NIL game, but with Monarch Money, you can. All right, continuing on in this episode, don't forget you can check out Locked On College Football or Locked On College Basketball for your second listen every day. So talking Neoklis Avdalas on today's episode of the show. Here's a couple quotes from some draft sites mentioning his scouting reports. High-level shot maker who can get hot from the perimeter. Does a good job breaking down a defense. This is from NBA Draft Room, I should mention. Shows good defensive instincts, reading passing lanes well. Good shot blocker for a small forward. Isn't crazy bouncy or athletic, but plays above the rim with ease. Has good court vision and passing instincts. Here's from NBA Draft Net. Offers a rare combination of size, feel, and playmaking from the wing position. His ability to handle the ball and operate in pick and roll and pass on the move gives him legitimately secondary creator upside. Already logging high-level pro experience with added strength and consistency, could become a valuable modern-day wing, one who can defend multiple positions, make plays for others, and knock down shots. And then we have Hoops Hype here, which says a fluid combo guard / wing with size and versatility to play three positions effectively. Strong pick and roll operator, 74th percentile as a ball handler there. Smart secondary playmaker who makes quick reads. Comfortable finishing off cuts. Effective in transition. He was in the 96th percentile in points per possession on transition. Engaged team defender who tags rollers, rotates on time, and navigates screens. Streaky shooter with poor three-point consistency. Isolation scoring still developing, 26th percentile ISO scoring. Shot selection and release speed limit spot up effectiveness. Limited vertical pop and lacks an explosive first step. He can lose focus off ball defensively, but a lot of young players do. And has trouble staying in front of quicker guards. So you don't really want him guarding twos, would be kind of my additive to that. Decision making under pressure is still inconsistent, especially when blitzed and pick and roll. That doesn't work if you're playing Houston. And then shooting off movement and contested catch and shoot attempts need improvement. So that's from Hoops Hype. And again, Hoops Hype, NBA Draft Net, and NBA Draft Room, the sites that I'm using there for some of those. He was just at the NBA Draft Combine, and here's how he measured and tested in these different areas. So he measured 6'7.5" without shoes, which is tied 12th among non-centers at the Combine and ranked 22nd of 72 players overall at the Combine. So he's a tall player. 6'9" wingspan. That measured 32nd among non-centers, 42nd of 72 in total wingspan. So about average there to below average. you would expect the wingspan to be a little bit bigger given the height. 8 foot 8.5 standing reach, that tied 16th among non-centers. That was 26th of 72 players at the combine. So solid standing reach. He was only 198 pounds. So that'd be something that you'd look to add a little bit of weight to him. I don't know how much you can do if he's only in Lawrence for 1 year, but maybe you can add like 5 pounds of muscle here or there, especially if he's not here in the offseason. But anyway, 8.25 hand length, which was actually the smallest among small forwards, power forwards, and centers at the combine. So does not have the hand length is actually very small. The hand width, though, was 19th of 72 players measured at 9 3/4. So very wide hands, but not long hands. I don't know like what's better. I don't know. Part of me is like, well, the hand length would be better because it helps you get vertically up. But on the other side, hand width allows you to palm a basketball and like grab rebounds better. So I don't know. Maybe they both matter in some way, but that was just kind of a weird quirk with him. Shooting in some of the shooting drills, he shot 9 of 10 on free throws. So good there. He was 19 of 30 off the dribble, which was tied 36th among 69 there. So about average. He was 14 of 25 on spot ups, again, tied 39th among 69. So again, about average there. And then 11 of 25 on the 3-point star drill, which was only 58th of 69 in that drill. So the shooting average to below average basically throughout. The athletic testing, he ran a 10.98 lane agility time. That was 28th of 68 and 10th among 27 forwards, so above average there. By the way, my guy Ben Henshaw, who maybe we'll do a deep dive on him later, he was first. So Ben Henshaw, who I've really liked for his 3-point shooting and offensive creation, was the quickest guy who tested at the combine. That's pretty cool. Anyway, Darryn Williams, who Kansas missed out on, he had an 11.73, so much less quick. That ranked near the bottom. So if we're just to do a quick comparison of Avdalas to Williams, Williams obviously the much more proven player in college. Williams, I think, a more consistent player overall, and Williams a more consistent shooter. Williams also probably has even more feel for the game. He's also older, right? Now, for Avdalas, I think you look at I don't look at Avdalas as being like a great athlete, but he's definitely a better athlete than Darryn Williams. He's also bigger than Darryn Williams. But I think Williams gives you a lot more in other areas. So it just kind of depends on what you're looking at there if you're making that comparison. Avdalas also ran a 3.24 second 3/4 court sprint that ranked 16th of 27 forwards, so below average there, 43rd among 68 total players, so again below average there. In the standing vertical, he jumped a 27-inch that tied 52nd of 68, so not super explosive vertically, and a 33.5-inch max vertical, which ranked 41st of 68, so not the best leaper in the world. It's a good thing he does have at least good height to combine with those two. In the scrimmages, though, he performed very well, and I think that speaks to he's a player who has good feel for the game, and so that worked out there. 44 minutes played, among the scrimmages, 21 points scored, 14 rebounds, 9 assists on 4 of 10 from 3. So if you viewed it as, because I forget if it was 2 or 3 scrimmages for the 44 minutes, but if let's say we viewed his 44 minutes played as 2 separate games of 22 minutes per game, that means if he was playing 22 minutes per game, that would average out as a 10.5 point, 7 rebound, 4.5 assists per game mark in 22 minutes. Very good stats there. So I think overall, I'd say like for his position, if we're just summing this stuff up, how he tested at the combine, above average size to good size. I guess it also depends if he's the 3 or the 4. But anyway, above average to good size. Below average shooting. Below average athlete. But then again, you also have to realize you're comparing this when I'm saying that, okay, he ranked 16th of 27 forwards in the 3/4 court sprint, or he ranked 10th of 27 forwards in the lane agility time, or he was 52nd of 68 players in the standing vertical. We are comparing these to other players who are in the NBA draft process. We are comparing these to other players who are in the NBA draft combine. And what do those players have in common? They're either the players with like the highest potential, who are young players, who are probably pretty good athletes, or they're the most accomplished players like in college basketball or wherever they're coming from. These are the best of the best. That is why they're going to get drafted, or at least they're in conversation to get drafted. So it's one thing to compare them to this, where you could say, okay, he's below average at this, he's above average, he's average at this. If you compare him to the full population of college basketball, those numbers go up, right? Because not every player in college basketball is going to get to the point of playing in the combine. So if you're an average athlete at the combine, probably means you're at least an above average athlete in the pool of talent in college basketball, right? You almost graded on a curve a little bit there. So if you do adjust for those, you'd probably say, okay, if he comes to Kansas, you would say he has good size, he's an average shooter and an average athlete. And that's a pretty good mix of things, especially at this point where Kansas is looking. So what exactly would he add to the team? How would he fit in with KU? Would he start? Let's get to all those next. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks, and thanks for tuning in anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. Again, Locked On College Football, Locked On College Basketball for your second listen every day. But okay, how exactly would Neoklis Avdalas fit in with KU? Obviously, this would be a big time get if Kansas could get him. I think I've seen some people say that, okay, well, Williams is obviously the better, college player, the more proven college route, but Avdalas gives you a higher ceiling. I don't know that I agree with that. Like, okay, if you're telling me that you're getting multiple years out of Avdalas, I agree with that. If we're talking about who's going to end up having the better NBA career, yeah, I think I can agree with that. But if you're only going to get 1 year out of Avdalas, do you really have the time to see if he has a higher ceiling than Darryn Williams? So I don't know that I agree with that, but you can't get Darryn Williams at this point in time. So what better way to pivot? And Avdalas would be either number 1 or number 2 on the available players, at least the ones I've heard of. Maybe there's another international player that I've never heard of that's actually like better than this that's available. I don't know. But among the ones that have been mentioned to some degree playing college basketball, like Avdalas would probably be my number 1 or number 2 target. We'll do a deep dive on Marko Radunovic, who would be in that conversation as well. So what he would add to the team, though, I think he would continue the theme of this Kansas team has a lot of positional length, has a lot of positional versatility. He would certainly fit right in, and that would be perfect to continue that with Kansas. He could play the 3, he could play the 4, right? It would give you more passing and feel. If you're talking about adding another player who's going to be handling the ball a good amount and another player is going to have a higher usage compared to the rest of the players on the team, you want them to have good feel for the game. You want them to be a good passer, that they can get the other role players involved, that they can, get it back to Darryn Peterson, that they can get it to Flory Bidunga. And I think he does those things and shows those things. And you'd be able to really take advantage of, imagine a 4-5 pick and roll with Avdalas and Flory where opposing college 4-5s are trying to guard them, where for the most part, like Flory is going to be more athletic than the opposing team center, and Avdalas is going to be, more athletic if a team's playing a traditional power forward. If you're running that 4-5, like that's going to be a really successful 4-5 pick and roll, especially as a secondary action to what you have with Darryn Peterson, and you play Jaden Dawson or whoever off the ball. He would also give you another ball handler. Never have enough of those. He would give you another transition wing. He would give you a guy who can grab and go in transition. That would be great. He would just give you another scoring option in general, somebody else who can get you buckets, because right now you're missing another one of those players. I also would put this, I don't know if I would put this in the what he would add or what he doesn't, because it really just does depend. The shooting is kind of going to be the big swing skill here, right? If he ends up coming in and shooting the ball well, there's a chance he could be an all Big 12 player. If he doesn't shoot the ball well, there's a chance that he's a souped up version of Tristan Enaruna for you, and that sounded a little harsh when I say souped up, like very souped up, because a lot more ball handling ability and, a lot more there than Enaruna. Like I still think the non-shooting version of Avdalas is still certainly one of the top, 5 players on this team, right? But if he does shoot it, he could be the second best player on this team, right? That's kind of the range of what you're talking about here. But what he doesn't, it is the unknown of the shooting. It is the inconsistencies of the shooting. Now, typically those are things that get better as you get older, and he will be 19. So, at least he's not like Svi coming in at 16 years old from international, but still a young player, right? But there is a chance that the shooting could be a strength. There's a chance it could be inconsistent. We don't know. I would also say not a crazy athlete, but, again, if we're comparing him to Darryn Williams, probably a little bit better there just without the production or the polish. So how would he fit in with the team? If Kansas added Neoklis Avdalas, I would be projecting him to be a starter today, right? And would he technically be the 3? Would he technically be the 4? I don't know. I don't think it really matters, to be honest. It probably just depends what matchup you're playing, right? Because I know some people, there's that saying, like, you are what you guard. And from that perspective, like, I think Trey White maybe a little bit more quickness on the outside. So maybe Avdalas would be more of the 4 defensively, and Trey White would be more of the 3. But I could see certain matchups where you match one up versus another, right? One of the scouting reports mentioned Avdalas sometimes falling asleep off the ball. If it's more of a stretch 4, Maybe you have Trey White on him because, if it's stretch four, he's going to be moving off the ball, and Trey White's more of a veteran player. Maybe you trust him more with the off-ball defense. If it's more of a true power forward, do you go with, Trey White, who probably actually is a little bit stronger than Avdalas, or do you go with Avdalas for more of the length? I don't really know that it matters that much, but both those guys would be pretty interchangeable, and it's good to have interchangeable wings that, it doesn't really matter. The big question here how do you adjust coming over? How do you adjust to Bill Self's coaching? How do you shoot the basketball? Those are kind of the big questions here, right? Because like I said, there's a chance if everything hits, if you adjust coming over right away, you could be the second best player on this team, which is saying something because Flory could end up being an awesome player, or at the very least, the third best player on this team, right? And you could be the difference in this Kansas team being a Final Four team versus being a Sweet 16 team. If it doesn't work out and you don't adjust to whether it's adjusting to being away from home, whether it's adjusting to Bill Self's coaching, whether it's adjusting to what's being asked of you or the college game or the new rules or playing with other players that you've never played with for, whatever it is, or you're just not shooting well, or, you're struggling with the off-ball defense and that's giving you a quick hook with Bill Self and that prevents you from, gaining up your confidence, that would certainly be a worry there, right? If some of those things happen, then yeah, maybe you are talking about being more of a bench forward coming off the bench. But I wouldn't predict that based on everything that this kid has done and based on what he's accomplished and being kind of a role player as a young player on some of these teams. Now, I do think this is a little bit different than, for instance, like Dame Sarr. Dame Sarr was staying with the senior team with Barcelona. He had to carve out a specific role on a senior team. This guy was loaned out. He was sent to smaller clubs where he had to, again, he wasn't the guy. He was still playing 18 minutes per game, but maybe he was a little bit more asked to be off the bench than a guy like Dame Sarr. So that'll be a real question how that would work if you added to KU. But yeah, this would be one that I think would be a home run. You do everything in your power at this point in time to get this kid because he would really fill a big hole and has the potential to be it would continue to give the potential, maybe not as much of a high percentage chance of happening as if you would have added Dame Sarr or something like that. But it does give you the chance to still have 3 first-round draft picks on next year's roster if you added Neoklis Avdalas. So do it if you can, if you're Bill Self. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Locked on Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page. We'll see you next time with LOJ.